6 o'clock, we'll call the meeting to order. We'll start with, microphones, everybody. Thanks, Chris. All right, we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, our first order of business is to approve or amend the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve or amend the agenda for tonight's meeting?
I'll approve it.
I've got a motion from Commissioner Tandy. I'm looking for a second.
Second.
Second from Commissioner Thieberhaft. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? This motion carries. Our next order of business is the consent agenda, which includes the meeting minutes from our last meeting in January 2024. I'm looking for a motion.
I'll approve.
I have a motion from Commissioner Tandy. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? This motion carries. Our next order of business is public hearings, of which we do not have any this evening. And so we will move to general business. Our first order of business on general business this evening is the election of a chair and vice chair. Do I have any nominations?
I'll nominate Amy for chair.
I'll second that.
I have a nomination for Commissioner Olson for chair. Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Going 3 times. All right. We'll take a vote on that motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, this motion carries. Can I have someone remind me as to who moved and who seconded? Okay,
I second.
just for the purpose of taking minutes. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. All right, we also need to choose a vice chair. Are there any nominations for vice chair this evening?
Can we co-chair?
I'm gonna look to our council for that.
Best just to have one, because the main responsibility would be is that, council.
Do you get sick a lot?
No,
You been vaccinated?
I am. All right, I'll take a motion or nomination for vice chair.
I'll nominate Thane Tandy.
All right, we've got a motion for Thane as vice chair.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second.
Is there a pay raise with that?
Nope. All right, I'll take we've got a motion and a second. We'll take a vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, that passes 5-0 as well. Our next order of business on the agenda is Planning Commission training.
Thank you. We have our city attorney. Here with us tonight to do the training. You want to do it to the podium, or do you want to-
Have control of the lights from the podium. I'm happy to do it there, or I can just sit here.
I'll do that.
I didn't think there was.
Have a chair.
It was actually pretty good. This.
All right, good evening, everybody. First order of business is a really important question. I'm gonna give you an element you grew up thinking, I want to be on the planning commission.
Next question.
I don't think what it was. I probably would have raised my hand.
The only commissioner we knew was Commissioner Gordon. Wasn't he with Batman or something?
You go.
Yeah, I was still waiting for my cape, but they must be on back order or something, huh? Okay.
So the idea of this is to cover some basic information, some basic duties. I know a couple of you are newly appointed. Most of you have been around for a while. I'm still gonna talk to you like this is brand new. But if you have questions, we can do this interactive, no problem at all. Matt and I are gonna tag team a little bit. And any of the detailed, difficult questions will go to Matt. So, what we're gonna cover is basically your role as a body. We'll talk a little bit about the comprehensive plan, and ordinances, some of the common things that you will see. And then some sort of nuts and bolts rules that are gonna apply, like the 60-day rule, your procedures, open meeting law, and the Data Practices Act. All right, so you have, as a city, you have zoning powers that arise out of some organic law. First of all, both the federal, United States and Minnesota constitutions recognize that city governments can regulate the use of land. That's fundamental. We have to start from that. And then state statute delegates to the city in specific ways with some guardrails what you can do to regulate the land. And then we as a city adopt ordinances that can be tailored on a city by city basis based on your own history, what the cards you've been dealt are, what your vision is for where you want to go. So your primary role in this whole process as a planning commission, as the name implies, we're a planning agency, right? You're looking at where we are and where we're going. Never lose sight of the and where we're going part of your lens as you're looking at what comes in front of you. So in this particular city, your role is to make recommendations to the mayor and the people who do what the mayor says. Sorry, I'm being flippant because we're just training and having fun, right? To the city council, right? Mayor has 1 vote of 5 on the city council. And we're coming to voting for you guys in just a moment. But you'll make recommendations regarding the comprehensive plan. You'll do a lot of the laboring or kind of work to get all of this stuff ready, distilled, and presentable for the city council to have clear choices to make. You'll deal with the zoning and subdivision ordinance regularly. That's bread and butter. Sometimes you'll deal with zoning maps. Most of the time you're dealing with this as you're given, not making tweaks to it. Sometimes you'll get requests for variances, conditional uses, norm uses, and plats, subdivisions. So that was the substance. Now let's talk about the procedure. The planning commission has to act as a quorum. It's the group of you assembled that is the planning commission. As an individual, none of you have any independent authority to act for the city, to direct the city's staff, to speak to citizens authoritatively on behalf of the city. Of course, you can always express your views as a informed citizen. But you don't act for the city in any capacity at all, except when you're gathered together and you have a quorum. A quorum in this case means at least 3 of you are here. It's really important when we get into the nuts and bolts of addressing an application that comes before you. Citizen brings in an application for a variance or a conditional use permit, whatever. You need to remain neutral until the time comes to start talking about a decision. And so before the hearing in front of you, before you are assembled here, even when you are assembled here, it's important to just be in the gathering information mode. I'm just gathering information. I'm just gathering information. Don't take a position on any application until all of the information is in. What will happen is Matt or the new planner, Claire, will be presenting on behalf of staff, the applicant's application, the staff recommendations. The applicant will speak to you, and it's okay to ask them questions. You want to get all the information. What we're doing is asking questions. This is not the time to engage in a, I'm really concerned about this, or I don't like that, and you know, I'm gonna be feeling this way about, none of that. It's gathering information. That's all you're doing at this point. Many of the things that come before you will have a public hearing. A public hearing is the due process moment in your work, in the city's work. You're actually doing this for you and on behalf of the city council. This is the applicant's right to be heard, the public's right to be heard on whatever is coming before you, whether this is a good idea for the community or not a good idea for the community, whether it's within their rights or not quite within their rights. This is their opportunity to be heard. So in order to honor that fundamental constitutional principle of due process, they are entitled to be heard before you make a decision. That's why we need to just be in gathering information mode before we start finalizing what, obviously you're human beings, you're gonna have some initial impressions coming into anything, all of us do. But before you start getting into, all right, it's time to roll up our sleeves and decide how we think about this, get everything in from the public hearing. The chair will close the public hearing, and then the chair will turn to the panel for, okay, let's talk about this. What do you guys think? There's a reason why, as I go through this slide, if you look back, this is the one that I spent the most time on.
Yeah.
There's two reasons for that. One, I just said, fundamental constitutional rights of our citizens. You know, we're here to serve the public. We're going to honor their constitutional rights. But number two, it's the easiest rule in practice to forget about. We really want to have conversations with people, particularly when they come into this room to talk to you. Really want to just, it's just so easy to start forecasting. I haven't heard everything you're going to say, but I already know where I'm going. We got to avoid any sense that we are making decisions before all the evidence is in. Okay, moving on, I'll get off of that soapbox and on to the next smaller soapbox. Role of the chair, not much of a soapbox here. Obviously, Chair Olson will preside at the meetings with the vice chair whenever Chair Olson is sick. I've got to tell you, I'm impressed that you called 3 times for someone else to get a nomination when you already had it in hand. That's
She didn't want it, clearly.
It's not about the limelight, it's about.
So, here, obviously, what you just did and you've done before, the chair will make sure you step through the agenda. Agenda gets set and you follow through the agenda. We don't stray from the agenda. Agenda items can be broad by their nature, but we're gonna do the business that we publicly told the citizens we were gonna be doing today.
Yep.
And then the chair makes sure everybody has a chance to be heard. We don't talk over each other. It's important to respect the chair. Some basic procedure. I know the city has kind of proudly, I think, a sort of an informality about the way we talk with each other. The only sort of guardrails we need around that is one person talks at a time. And the way we make sure that happens is you ask the chair for permission to speak, and she recognizes you in order. And that's the way we just kind of keep things moving without going back and forth. So you should always, when you want to jump into the conversation, say, Commissioner Tandy said something and Commissioner Casey wants to respond to that. Commissioner Casey doesn't go, well, Thane, you know, he says, you know, Chair Olson, you know, and raises his hand. If she recognizes him, then he speaks. She should have control over who's talking and when. And it should be liberally granted, of course. It's just a matter of making sure everyone gets their turn and everyone has an opportunity to express their views. The reason that we have 5 and not 1 is because more views make for better product at the end. And so that's basically her role. It's obviously easy to say what she does, but in practice, the point is, it's actually her meeting. She presides, you go to her if you want to speak, and she'll open it up to everybody. And she decides when it's done, by the way, unless certain motions are happening, and we're not going to get into those right now.
Got it.
Okay. Obviously, we want to be fair and impartial, so if something comes up in the community that you actually have personal interest in, you need to abstain. We don't want any conflicts of interest, and this is obvious stuff, I think, but it's not just financial. If it's your brother's application or your mom's, These are things that can make you feel like my brother hat is more important than my commission hat. Anytime you feel like there's another influence on you that is gonna be a little bit more weighty than simply serving the city as a commissioner, that's a good time to step away. We always recommend, don't even get close to the line. If there's any question about it, just step back. And if there is an actual question and you're not sure, you can definitely reach out to me through Kathy or through Matt, and I'm happy to talk with you about whatever it is, and whether from a legal perspective, that looks like the kind of conflict of interest that you might want to step away from, or I get why you raise it. I really appreciate that you raise it, but that's not a problem at all. Feel free. I'm happy to help you with that. When you find, this happens sometimes, everything I'm sharing is because these things come up, right? When you find that there may be a conflict, but you just really, really want to vote on this thing, that's probably the time the flag should be going off in your head that maybe I should step back. You maybe didn't know this, but you are now local officials. The gift law applies to you. People can't give you gifts if they have any business before the city. Anything more than $5. That was done back in the day when you could get a meal in a diner for $5. That number hasn't changed. So now you can't even get a cup of coffee.
Mhm.
So no gifts. All right, back into the meat of what we do. Sometimes when we're working in the planning commission or the city council, we always have an eye on over our shoulder as the court system, who will make sure that we're doing this okay. And so, we live in a rule of law society. We are bound by the same rules that the citizen applicants are bound by. And sometimes they're easy to understand, and sometimes these are judgment calls, and sometimes you're wading into this swamp. And who knows what the law is going to shake out to be. Every planning commission training I've ever seen has this pyramid of discretion on it, so I had to throw it up there. I don't know how much you actually care about this, but when the city is making law, establishing policy, it has the most discretion. You're acting in a legislative capacity when the city adopts an ordinance that says, we want to allow this sort of thing in our city, or we want to prohibit this sort of thing in our city.
Okay.
I'm not talking about an applicant as appearing, we want to say it's the applicant. I'm talking about, we've established the policy for the city is we want camping, or we don't want camping, as though you have the authority to do that. That was hypothetical specifically, that could not come up. That's why I used it. A lot of discretion, but most of the time what you're doing is in the yellow, where we're applying our existing laws to someone's request to do something with their property. There, we have some discretion. In a lot of ways, there's discretion. This is where most of the cases come up. This is where it's most likely there can be a fight about whether we made the call correctly or not. We really want to do our best to make the call correctly, help the council make the call correctly by vetting this thoroughly and making good recommendations. The nature of the beast is sometimes you will face calls that it's not obvious. And just because someone challenges you doesn't mean you're not doing your best. You're not being honest and earnest and trying to get this right. It's just the nature of the beast. All real estate is unique. You learn that day one in property law in your first year of law school, and you find out after 30 years, it's still true every time. Something you think you've got rules that cover everything. Here's an exception. Oh, there's 17 exceptions. It's just very hard to design a policy that fits every single circumstance. And then the least discretion we have is when we're doing things like issuing building permits and stuff like that. People are entitled to it. We just have to do it. If you don't like it, that's too bad. You just have to do it. That's not really something that the planning commission would get into agendas. All right, so what information are you going to rely on whenever applicants come in front of you? First of all, and I said this a moment ago, and it bears repeating, the city is bound by its own laws. The rule I like to give, I usually do this with city councils, but You should act the way you'd expect your political opponents to act if they happen to be in power that day. We all want to be playing it straight by the rules. That's what keeps everyone at some, at least minimum level of confidence in government that we are here to serve. But we're bound by our law. Again, this is one where there's temptation from well-meaning people to, I know the rule says this, but this just makes so much sense kind of thing. We don't have discretion. We have to apply the law. And this is the second point I'm amplifying. You don't have authority. Certainly, even the city council has some very significant restrictions on this. The planning commission has no authority to make new rules or policy for the city. You may be asked by the council to vet something and make a recommendation about what policy direction you should take, but you have no authority. You are applying the rules that have been given to you to unique circumstances that come up. The rules will come from state law, your comprehensive plan, your city code, whether it's zoning code or subdivision code, depending on which type of application you have. Those are the rules, and the facts will come from the record that's submitted to you here in this room. It is not your role to go out and be independent investigators. This is a very tempting thing when it's a property you're familiar with, or an applicant you're familiar with, to go and do your own digging, as it were. The record needs to be what happens here in the room. The memos, the data that the staff has presented, the applicant has presented, you are absolutely within your rights to say, I want more information. Staff, please find, when you're sitting as a body, staff, please, we're concerned about this, please go down that track, tell us what you find. Applicant, we're really concerned about that. Give us more information. But it's the information you get here that is the record of decision. It's this information plus the rules that will be set out for you in the memorandum from staff. The rules are going to be pretty straightforward, and those of you who've been on the commission already know this. So get, here's the criteria we're going to apply. Here's the facts that we know about to plug in with that criteria. Where does it lead us? So the first area of substantive law that we're going to talk a little bit about tonight is your comprehensive plan. I'm going to talk about this, and then Matt's going to talk to you about your subdivision and zoning code. Comprehensive plan is a document that cities have to do every 10 years. So right now, all the cities are working from their 2040 plans. The plan is a guiding document that forecasts where are we going over the next 20 years. And it's a little bit aspirational in that we're anticipating certain types of development, we're hoping for certain types of development or non-development in certain areas that we want to preserve, depending on what your vision is for where the city should be going in the next 20 years. On the other hand, it also has a regulatory component to it, in which the law states that your city zoning code has to be consistent with your comprehensive plan. So if your vision is 20 years from now, this area that's currently agricultural land, this is actually going to be a city center. We want a retail, we want the next Mall of America. Again, I'm going to go with hypotheticals that are never going to come in front of you. Your comprehensive plan may talk about what's currently zoned agriculture is going to need a new zoning that accommodates some kind of mixed use or retail use or commercial use. So the comprehensive plan, if for such a dramatic change, would phase that and give you a certain amount of time where it's predicting when you'll make zoning changes. But say it said, we're ready to go. We want this to be our commercial node because we don't want it to drift any other places. We want to concentrate here. If that's true, then we need to next go to our zoning and update our zoning to make sure it fits what the comp plan says. This can be a complicated process. Most cities spend 20 years getting their code to catch up, and then they do a new one in the next 20 years getting the code to catch up. It's always a challenge and something we may find we're in the weeds on a little bit. So I won't go much further on that. But the point is, comp plan It's a vision statement kind of document, but it has consequences because we have to act in consistent with it. And as I said, every 10 years we review it. So every 10 years, there's a big heavy lift for the planning commission, and a consultant would be hired to do a lot of the work under your supervision. But in addition to that, sometimes an applicant will come forward with something that seems like a good idea, or at least seems like a good idea to the applicant, but for one reason or another is inconsistent with the comp plan. Then one of the things that we can be looking at is a minor amendment to the comp plan that's targeted to that specific thing. And they may ask for that, you may agree, you may not agree, but those are kinds of decisions that do come up with comp plans, even in between those 10-year redos.
Mhm.
Any questions on the material we've covered so far?
This is really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, then I'm going to turn it over to Matt to talk about the stuff you actually will be doing.
Alright. So subdivision ordinances, cities regulate subdivisions of land and of land through a subdivision ordinance. Subdivisions regulations specify the standards of the city related to size, location, grading, and improvement of lots, structures, public areas, trails, walkways, and parks, streets and street lighting, installations necessary for water, septic, electricity, gas, and other utilities. Subdivision regulations allow cities to ensure that a new development or redevelopment meets standards of the city for a safe, functional, good. Should say. Zoning ordinances. Zoning is a method of establishing a land use pattern by regulating the way land is used by landowners. A zoning ordinance has area standards that regulate the size and location of buildings and structures in the city. Area standards typically include rules about building location and size, include height, width, and bulk, the percentage of lot that may be occupied, and required yards or open spaces. For each district, a zoning ordinance sets forth allowable uses, which include permitted uses, accessory uses, conditional uses, and in some instances, interim uses.
Do you want to talk to us a little bit about permitted use, the differences, kind of high level between permitted uses, accessory uses, conditional and interim, or is that covered later on?
Yeah, I can just kind of give you the broad, like permitted uses would be something that we have set forward in our zoning ordinance that is in our fee schedule that we have basically already established that is allowed. Accessory uses would be something that's kind of attached to the property. Conditional uses would be something that they need to bring to the city that would change the comprehensive plan just for that specific property.
Mhm.
And then in some instances, interim uses, that's kind of more just for the short term and just for kind of a smaller amount of time. That doesn't really follow with the property when the new owner comes.
So every property has to have a principal use. And except in some kind of fancy zoning maneuvers, only one principal use on any given property. You'll have a list in your code, the permitted uses. So in a single family residential district, a permitted use will obviously include a home, it might include a church, something like that. That's the principal use, it's permitted because it says it right in your code, that kind of thing. An accessory use is also listed and will be permissible. That's going to be consistent with the principal use, and sort of serves the principal use. So I have a house, I also want a gazebo, something like that. A gazebo might be an accessory use, or an extra outbuilding, or something like that, if you have some of the nicer, like hobby farm type properties. We have lots of nice acreage properties here in town. A conditional use, this is really important. Conditional use is also a permitted use. You don't have discretion to say no to a conditionally permitted use. What you have discretion about is what kinds of conditions do we need to attach to that to protect the community around. These are the types of uses where we might have some concerns. So for example, I don't think we have any in town, but you might have a gas station. You might say that's a conditionally permitted use. Of course, we're gonna allow the gas station, but we're gonna attach some conditions like your hours of operation are gonna not be all night. You have a car wash, it's gonna shut down at a certain point in time to protect the neighbors from the noise. What we have the authority to do is attach reasonable conditions to these types of uses to make sure they're compatible with what surrounds them, but they're permitted. An interim use, as he was saying, has a shelf life. It has to end. And beyond that, it's sort of very, well, it's buried. There's a wide range of types that might come into it. So it's hard to talk about it in a meaningful way, other than to point out that this is something that's gonna end. Unlike every other, like a conditional use or a variance, I'm sorry to keep going. Those become property rights. Those are entitlements. You can sell the property and it will still have those entitlements. And interim use is not like that. It's for this owner to do this thing for this long. That's an interim use.
That's really helpful.
Yeah.
Both explanations were very helpful.
So then subdivision applications, city subdivision regulations will apply to most land divisions, the city encounters. Subdivision means any land vacant or improved, which is divided or proposed to be divided into two or more lots, parcels, sites, units, or plots. And then the types of subdivision applications we have is a minor subdivision, no planning commission action would be required. Plats, and then plan unit developments, PUDs.
Do we have any planned unit developments in this community right now?
No.
As a concept, what does that entail, just for our edification?
Land unit developments, there's an overlay district, so there'll be certain parts of town where you can do this. A common use for plan unit development is to give the city some flexibility to accommodate a use that would be pretty challenging to tick all of the boxes, but at the same time is consistent with our comp plan, our vision. It's a good idea, it makes sense for everybody, but there's some challenges. So a good example would be, I mentioned a moment ago that most properties have to have a single principal use. A common use for a PUD is a mixed use development, where we're gonna have, the first floor is gonna be our restaurant, a couple of storefronts. On top of that, we're gonna have some housing. On the same site, on the outlot, we're gonna have a Caribou drive-through or Starbucks, depending. I haven't yet figured out the politics of the commission. One or the other. We would use a PUD, first of all, to allow more than one's principal use.
Sure.
And then second, where you would otherwise be talking about variances, in PUD land, the word is flexibilities. Where are we going to allow some things to bend a little bit to make this project fit? While still being, and this is really key, consistent with the spirit and intent of the code in that zoning district. It's not this is our trump card, we can do whatever we want kind of a thing. And sometimes it can feel like that because the standards are a little bit amorphous. It doesn't get a whole lot more specific than what I just shared, actually, in terms of standards. So we have to be, in my view, be conservative. But I don't know that there's gonna be much of an appetite for PUDs and make credit for it, but that's what a PUD is.
Yeah, it's just as we are, going through the process of learning what each of these things are, some will be more familiar and some won't, so it's just helpful to kind of talk through some of these examples and, you know, get a better understanding of what it means.
I actually considered leaving it off the slide because I'm not sure it's gonna come up, but it's in your code, so I'm not.
Always good to have the training.
Is that always primarily with commercial or residential, like condos, and then like a commercial, is that primarily or majority of the time, or are there any other situations?
There are many other situations.
Is that like this new
That's-
thing coming down the pipe with Minnesota and? No, nothing to do with that.
With what?
Oh, that,
Legislation.
yeah, let's,
Oh,
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
No,
That
Yeah.
missing middle housing takes away all the sides he's talking about.
Right, right. If the legislature
If that
does,
passes, you can forget the whole presentation.
we'll have a different presentation after
Sure,
that.
do you
So
see
it's gonna be like- That'll be my
do
presentation.
you please state your name and? Yeah.
The example that you mentioned and then that I gave when I was just talking about, that's sort of the most typical example and where they were originally used. But they actually are flexible enough as a concept that PUDs can be useful in other scenarios as well. If someone creative comes forward with an application about something and they want to do it as a PUD, Matt and I and Claire will work together to make sure you understand what your guardrails are, what your discretion is, and how this does or doesn't fit. But most of these things, I actually feel like it's important to get this overview, but especially for those of you who are here for the first time, you'll really get all this multi-site processing and application or two. You'll see it all in once the wheels hit the road.
So next is conditional and permits. I guess it comes with a little bit more, yeah. The differences between the two, so conditional uses are the uses which are generally appropriate any specified district. This district but requires special planning considerations for each. Sorry, excuse me. And acting upon a conditional use permit, the city will consider the effect of the proposed use upon the health, safety, and general welfare of the city. In addition to the standards and the requirements of the city code, the city may impose additional conditions as necessary to protect the best interests of the neighborhood or city as a whole. Like Pete was saying, use permits, use means temporary use of a property until the occurrence of a particular event or those zoning regulations that fall. Yeah, I'm good. Those two. Yeah,
That's like your gravel quarries and stuff like that, when they get a extension for mining.
Excellent.
Yep.
Okay.
So then we'll move on to variances. A variance is a modification to the provisions of city code as applied to a specific piece of property. Variances are only permitted when in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the city code. And consistent with the comprehensive plan, so it needs to fall under all of those for a variance to be granted. Variances must demonstrate practical difficulties, meaning that the owner proposes to use the property in a reasonable manner that is not permitted by the ordinance. The owner's plight is due to circumstances unique to property and not caused by the owner. The variance, if granted, will not alter the essential character of the location. So economic considerations alone do not constitute a practical difficulty. Any questions with variances?
What do you consider economic conditions, considerations?
Basically, just within our code, right?
So, lots of times a variance, practical difficulty might be something like, there's a feature of the property, there's an embankment, there's something where if we use the setback requirements, the code required, this would be really expensive to build. But if you give me an extra 3 feet in this direction, then this all makes sense. That's a practical difficulty. Yes, there's an economic component, but that's okay. The practical difficulty is there's a geologic feature that we're accommodating. On the other hand, you get a subdivision development. You get a plat in front of you. And the developer says, I've got 100 lots here. But if you give me a variance on this particular thing, I can squeeze 2 more lots into this. There's nothing unique or difficult or strange about the land, but there's an economic motivation to give the variance. The economic motivation by itself isn't a reason to give the variance. There has to be some other reason. Does that help?
Thank you.
Any other questions? You good? Good.
Right, so those are the things, the substantive applications that you're likely to see most of. No, I in that order, okay. So as you would, I'm sure I'll expect, majority vote wins. You need a quorum to have a meeting. If there are 4 of you here, there's a quorum. You need 3 votes. Because 2 to 2 is a tie, that doesn't win. 3 of you are here, you need 2 votes, 2 to 1 wins. There are some things that, I'm not sure actually anything the PC would do as opposed to the city council, but there are some things that require that the vote count be of the total number of members rather than of those who are present.
Mhm.
And when those things, for example, with city council, they have to pass a special assessment, a public improvement project for which they want to specially assess. They have to pass it by a 4/5 vote if it wasn't something that was petitioned for. That requires 4 votes, whether there are 4 people present or 5 people present.
Mhm.
We're not looking at the majority of the members. So I'm not sure that's gonna apply here. It's just straight up. You need 3 to do business. And it's the majority of whoever's ever there. If you have a tie vote, that's a fail. It doesn't pass. The motion doesn't pass.
Can Amy Zoom when she's got the flu?
We're gonna have a slide on the open meeting law. We can talk about that. There actually is a provision in the open meeting law, up to 3 times a year for you to participate in the meeting remotely. You can participate in meetings remotely from other public locations more than 3 times. If you were traveling and you really wanted to attend the meeting anyway, you went to the local library and in some public space. When you're flu, obviously you don't want to be in public. There are rules about it, but it's possible. Yeah. Not repeatedly, but a few times it can happen. And again, as you would expect, it's a motion, second, and then a voice vote. And the way it actually should happen is the moment someone says, I move for whatever, everything else stops and the chair looks for a second. If there's a second to that motion, now you discuss it. If there's no second, the motion fails for want of a second and you just go on with business, assuming there was no motion. So the rhythm is motion. As soon as you hear the word motion, Chair Olson, that's okay. Do I have a second? It's gotta be like automatic.
Yeah.
Someone seconds it now, you can second it because you are gonna vote for it, or you can second it because you think it's worth talking about. Generally speaking, second things you support, right? But
Mhm.
you haven't committed your vote at that point. Then you discuss it, and then there has to be a vote on that motion. You can't not vote on that unless the motion was withdrawn, and that's a kind of a rare special procedure. And I'm sure Matt will look forward to walking you through how that works if someone wants to withdraw their motion. So basically speaking, the person who moved can withdraw their motion, but if it's moved and there's a second, you need both of them to withdraw, or you're still gonna have to vote on it.
Got it.
Okay, 60-day rule. There's a statute that is intended to keep city government from stalling developers or other, property owners who are trying to do something from waiting for years for the government to tell them whether they can or not. And we call it the 60-day rule. It's $15.99, it's at $15.99. We have 60 days from the time we get a complete application to make a final decision. And that will be the council's final decision because yours is a recommendation.
Mhm.
So staff is always tracking that. The memos to you from staff and the memos to the council from staff should always have kind of in bold, this is our deadline. to get this done. So that it gets to you at the next, this month's meeting, so it can get to council and we're still on time. There is the possibility of an extension for another 60 days. But it's a good idea to think of that as, if we need it, we can, but it's better to just try and target the 60 days. You'll get some big complicated projects that you know from the beginning, not this is gonna be 120 days. But ordinary, simple things, someone has a single family property, they want a variance for whatever. It's important to process those within 60 days. If you need the time, it's available, but should really only be if you need it. And then this comes up a lot on really substantial developments like the ranch at Credit River, Yellowstone, some of the big subdivisions. When those things are being processed, sometimes the developer themselves needs more time to meet you where you're at in order to get this thing fully cooked. We can go longer than the 60-day or the 120-day if the applicant consents to that. They need to consent, right? We don't want to take that.
Got it.
The consequences of blowing the deadline. Consequences of blowing the deadline are blowing it, right? It's automatically approved. Whatever they ask to do, however good or bad an idea it is, they got it if we don't act in time. The law is really unforgiving in this area. The courts are not going to help you with that. You just approved it. If it's something that was in your authority to approve. Can't use a 60-day rule to put a nuclear power plant at Credit River.
Yeah,
That's not within your authority to decide that kind of thing.
No.
But if they want an extra, they want a variance to say, we want 3 houses on this property instead of the one for 2.5 acres. And you don't deny it in time, they got it. So 60-day rule, you'll see that in every staff memo. It's a date you should be paying attention to.
mhm. Can you talk about when that clock starts?
So they submit an application. If they've submitted a complete application, the clock starts as soon as they've submitted it.
Mhm.
Staff has 15 business days to let them know that they're missing something in their application. What the application has to have is all set out in the ordinance. You need to give me this set of plans, you need to show me your site plan, blah, blah, blah. All the stuff that you're asking for in your ordinance, they have to have submitted. If they're missing something, staff has a window of opportunity to tell them that they haven't given you everything.
Got it,
And until they've given you everything, the clock doesn't start.
got it.
Once they do, staff have to deem the application complete at that time, should let them know it's deemed complete, and that starts your clock.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure. The other aspect of the 60-day rule, this is in the statute, it's more about substantive rather than the timing. You have to state in writing the reasons you've denied the application. This aids the applicant to understand what they would need to do differently if they want to try and fix their problems, or significantly for you, it helps the court understand the reasons for your decision in case the court is going to get involved in reviewing your decision. And staff will help you with all of that. You're not going to sit there and have to write all this stuff down. Typically what happens when something is denied, well, you're recommending anyway, this would be for the council.
Mhm.
But they'll adopt a resolution denying something in writing, saying the reasons, if it's a denial.
Yeah.
All right, open meeting law. So yes, the chair, when she's sick, can zoom into a meeting once. And I can give you more training on how all of those rules, they all came out of the pandemic. There used to be not much at all, and now it's been revised twice since the pandemic to enable, because we all know how well this technology works.
Yeah.
Someone who's not too ill to participate, but not good idea to be out in public, could do that a couple of times. I say a couple because that gives us a hedge if there's 30, but let's think of it as 2.
Yeah.
Those 3. All right, so your meeting as a planning commission is governed by the open meeting law. You have to conduct business in public. In town hall, doors open, people are welcome to come and watch. The city is not required to video these things and live stream them, but that's the policy choice for transparency and engaging with the community that this city and many, many have made, but it has to be done in public. And so everything that happens here, we kind of take for granted. This is what a public meeting is. And we don't want to stray from this. There are a number of ways it's tempting to stray from this that we have to watch out for. A meeting, by definition, doesn't mean you came to this room. A meeting, by definition, doesn't mean you're going to vote on something. A meeting is anytime any three of you or more are together to discuss or even just to hear information that's relevant to your work for the city. That's a meeting. Don't think it's because we're voting that's a meeting. Voting is not part of the test. There's a case that is a little bit shocking, but it's the law. A city, 3 or 4 members of a city council of 5, so a quorum, went to a seminar about something relating to city planning, or I can't remember what it was about, totally city business. They didn't notice that as a meeting. They just all went to it together to listen. And the court said they violated the open meeting law. Anytime you gather as a group to receive information about a city business, it's a meeting.
Yeah.
So get to know one of your buddies, but don't get to know 2 of your buddies.
At the same time.
At the same time, right? Email, this is another subject we need to be careful about. There's conflicting authority on whether talking as a group in an email is a meeting or not. Obviously, you can have all the features of a meeting. You guys can decide sort of privately what you're going to do with something and have figured everything out. So it's fully baked before we're ever in public, simply by emailing each other. And that's not a good idea. So the administrative agency that's responsible for issuing opinions about how this law applies say that emails can be a meeting. And so we should assume that emails can be a meeting. There is an unpublished Court of Appeals decision that says emails are not a meeting. They're in writing. Anyone can request them. So what you did, the world's going to know what you did. So there's a conflicting authority. And so the safe thing to do is to not go anywhere near the line. Don't create any controversy. Just don't talk to each other in emails about business for the city, at least with more than one other person. The law around open meeting is definitely not trying to shut out. Chair Olson really wants to talk with Commissioner Tandy about this one. Again, I just want a sounding board about this. You know, you can do that. That's not a meeting. It's just 2 of you. And it's putting your head, that's okay. I'm not suggesting that's a good idea that we want to adopt as a practice. The pick a buddy thing was absolutely a joke. But it's okay to talk to somebody, but you can't have more than one.
What's the best practice when questions come up and how they ought to be fielded to staff for input? Thinking in context of meetings and email, you know, and how the law applies.
So if any of you receive a question from a constituent or an applicant or something, first of all, the applicants should not be communicating with you. They should be communicating with staff. But this is America, you can talk to your government. So if someone sends you a question, email or whatever, just forward it right to Matt or Claire or Kathy. Don't respond, other than maybe to say, thank you, I received it, I forwarded it on to staff. That's it. Don't copy the whole planning commission on that. Often you receive emails from staff with, like, here's your packet or something. There may be some note from staff about something that you're gonna give you a heads up about something coming up on the meeting. We'll often have a tag at the end of it that says, please don't reply all to this. We don't want to start talking about any of this right now. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, that was in practicality. It's just some of the advice that we got previously was if we have questions about a particular application, when we've seen the packet, forward that to staff. If staff see that as being something others would be interested in, they can send that answer out to all. And I think that probably still makes sense.
That's kind of the standard for when you do it, is you send it, you have a question, you send it directly to staff. Staff's role is to look at it, I'm loud, but I'll let this anyway. Just in case it's gonna be picked up somewhere else. Once staff gets that, I mean, they can provide the answer, but staff's role then is to make sure and to look at it. I always say is in the council's position, my job is to make sure that all council members have the same information. Same thing for here. If a planning commission member is sending some stuff, if it's just a simple little nuance thing, you may just send something right back to them. But if it's something that is like, okay, this has some impact, this has got some information that we're sharing, staff will share that out with everybody. And my typical guidance in what I do and what I advise, on Matt doing is that commission members, council members are always blind copied, so you don't accidentally hit reply all. We try to take away your ability to make the accident to hit reply all and communicate with everybody. So my standard is usually blind copy everybody. And then you hit reply, you come back to me, and then we get it out to the whole if it needs to be.
Thanks.
To circle back, quick question, in regards to this situation you ran into, or I don't know if you dealt with it or not, and feel free to add or omit if it's conflict of interest. The 4 officials go to this meeting. There was a lawsuit over it? Under what grounds?
They violated the open meeting. They had a meeting without notice, telling the public they were.
Who was the plaintiff?
Anybody can be planned, actually, the open.
They just want to
meeting
sue for the fun of it?
Oftentimes in these cases, it's the press, that, is trying to keep up with what you're doing and doesn't know what you're doing.
Or it's maybe
Or-
close to an election and then they wanna cause turmoil, or?
The number of reasons why someone might be a plaintiff in an open meeting law case is a long list.
They got denied earlier, retaliation. Come on, give it to me. You don't need to be a lawyer.
All you really need to know, there are no shortage of people who might want to sue. And there are no real hurdles to them.
Can you tell me what the outcome was of that?
I wasn't the lawyer in the case, there's no conflict in that case. The cases that I've handled, you won all of them, sorry. But that particular case, it was, the Court of Appeals in the state of Minnesota held that they violated the open meeting law. You violate the open meeting law intentionally, it has to be intentional, then you face individually the members who violated the law. It's not the city corporately, it's the members. You face a $300 fine. If you violate the law 3 times while working for the same city, I guess you could do it 5 times if it's, I violated it 2 times here and 2 times in my work volunteering for this other work, but 3 times you lose your job as a commissioner, and you can't run again for the length of period of time that the term is. So you basically have to be gone for a term before you can come back on.
Was there financial payments out on that one?
I don't.
The safest remedy in that situation to head off that would have been to just simply post the notice that, so.
Yeah.
Okay, that's helpful to know.
It's very easy when it's a training scenario like that to know, okay, we have the people going and then staff should be posting notices to alleviate problems like that. What you run into is more when you run into each other,
Sure.
out at the
Local
golf
parade.
course, at the local golf course, and, oh, we just saw the agenda packet and we start having that conversation. That's the one that we can't post the notice for, and that's what you have to be really conscious about.
Yep.
You know, if you're all going to a training session and it's there, then we're typically gonna cover you and get a notice posted on something that's an official event such as that, but what we can't do is the unofficial meetings, or that happen.
Or the appearance of a meeting. So cases that I have defended, there was a particular school board that after school board meetings, they liked each other, they all went to the local watering hole together and had a beer. And at a certain point in the life of that school district, even though this has been going on a long time, the school board made a very controversial decision. Now, there's a lot of people who are very unhappy with them watching them under a microscope for everything they're doing
Mhm.
with a feeling of suspicion. And so there's actually nothing illegal about the five of you getting together and having a beer at one of your homes, as long as you never, ever, ever talk about city business in that. But you are courting disaster, because who's gonna believe that the one thing you have in common is the one thing that
Yeah.
never comes up when you're out socializing?
Absolutely.
So it's a really good idea if you happen to be in the same place, there's, a local, summer festival or whatever, where you want to get out in the community together, or at the same time, don't congregate together. And if you happen to be together, make sure you're talking about kids and college plans and stuff that have nothing to do with city business. And then move along.
Just real quick, so the planning committee commission doesn't have an email, a city email address, right? So a citizen would have to know our personal email. That's unlikely, right?
Unlikely, the three have, the two new, I've not set up city, email accounts for, but.
Oh,
Yeah.
got it, okay.
Oh.
Not sure I want one, but okay.
We'll come to that on the next slide, but you definitely should not be doing any city business on a personal email account.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
The other thing that comes up, this is related to email, but also to, talking about things not, all together, but in a serial fashion, where the chair talks to Commissioner Tandy, who talks to Commissioner Martell, and before the meeting ever happens, the three of them have all figured out what they're gonna do. That's a serial meeting.
Mhm.
So it doesn't matter if it's all happening together. You can't be sort of collecting straw polls, figuring out what you want to do about something. And just because you only did it with one person's fine. You did it with one person, and you did it with another person, and then those two talk, and it's just not a good idea. Basically, you shouldn't be talking to each other about city business outside of this meeting. Really, there's no reason for you to do it.
Exactly.
And I answered this question earlier on, but you can lose your office. It's pretty rare that you would violate it intentionally 3 times. And it's not just you got sued 3 times, you actually have to have lost those lawsuits 3 times to be a judicial determination that you violated the law. So it's only for really stubbornly disobedient types of people that could ever come up.
What's the statute of limitations on that?
So test it out.
Your term? Oh, really?
So the fine is $300 if you did it intentionally. Intentionally doesn't mean, you know what, we thought about it, what we want to do tonight, this will be fun, let's go violate the open meeting law. That's not what intentionally means. It means you knew better.
I'm actually asking for Commissioner Casey, just for the record.
There's a potential attorney fee award to the plaintiff who wins. The number is relatively small by attorney fees standards, but it's nothing to sneeze at. It's $13,000. The city can't pay a $300 fine for you. That has to be paid by you if it's assessed. The attorney's fees and costs, the city has the option of deciding that they will pay it for you, but that's up to the city. So it's better to avoid all of this altogether. Data practices law. I'm gonna start with the last point on my slide here. It doesn't matter what device you're on. Doesn't matter what email account you're using. If you, as a local official for the city, are conducting any kind of city business, that's government data. And a citizen requesting it is entitled to it. If it's not private or not public, but most of what you do is gonna be public data. What we don't want to have, and I've done this any number of times, it's such a headache. You don't want to turn over your cell phone to Kennedy and Grayman Law Firm to go through all of your texts and figure out which ones we have to disclose and which ones are embarrassing, but we don't disclose, and which ones are embarrassing. We do have to disclose. You don't want the law firm going through your personal email account or your social media or your texts on your phone. So it's really important to segregate personal life from professional life in the hardware that you pick up to use for it. I don't know if email is hardware or software, but it sounded really good when I said it. So just separate those two things completely. Pretty much all the information that we presented to you is public data. Pretty much everything that would come from you is going to be public data. Yeah, likelihood that you would be encountering something that would include elements of non-public data is pretty remote. And if so, we'll be involved if we want to worry about that. But the point is, there's always people watching and reading everything you do, and so you should conduct yourself accordingly. All the public has to do to get the data is make a data request. We can't say that's great, here's our fee schedule, so give us $5,000 for that. No, we just have to produce it. It's electronic, we don't even charge for copies.
Yeah.
I don't want to get too in the weeds on this, but the point is it's easy access, as it should be.
Mhm.
And so those of you who are in a position where you might be generating data, in my world, we always talk, make that email to the person you're mad at, like a judge is going to be reading it in open court. Here, whatever you write it with the tone and decorum as though everybody here is reading what was said, and then multiply that by about 1,000. About 5,000 people who might be interested in what you do. So because I thought it would be really funny, I ended the slideshow on the ugliest stuff that I had to offer you. That's it. So, you have any questions about that? Well, thank you very much. It was fun meeting all of you. And if you have questions, I know staff can help and I'm available to staff. And if anything gets really hairy, you might see me at one of these meetings when there's some real heavy lifting that has legal ramifications as opposed to the heavy lifting you do every day with the policy choice.
One question that I think might just be helpful. We've referenced the fact that there's the comprehensive plan and there is an associated cycle with that. Do you want to just kind of give a high level as to what that looks like?
Generally speaking, the cities will do the comprehensive plan in the year 8. So that you're ready to get, because it has to be done by city, adopted by city, sent to the Met Council, approved by the Met Council. But typically the heavy lifting, there's still right from that. And the council needing to approve either perhaps the firm that's doing your planning right now, or somebody that helps with this. This is not an in-house.
Yeah.
We don't have resources in house to do this planning. But they'll be spending several meetings on that.
Got it.
Initial forecasts. Came out of Knoxville, and forecasts. There'll be another process. So the Met Council has started their cycle leading up to what they send out to give us the parameters that we get into. Conversations are ongoing, and you know, that started at more at the Met Council level right now. Feedback is happening, but yeah, we'll get into it. Dig into it heavy on our side.
Yeah. Are there any other questions? Thank you all for the informative.
Yeah, thanks for your time.
presentation. I think our last order of business, if there are no other questions, is to adjourn. Can I get a motion? I have a motion from Commissioner Thebrath. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, that motion carries. We are now adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Well, you still ready?
Oh, yeah.
We got it. We got to make a motion, too.